Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. The Last Guardian. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of her research vessel, watching the crystalline spires of the alien fortress pierce the perpetual twilight of Europa's sky. After 3 years of searching, the structure's existence was no longer just a theory buried in ancient Jovian texts. It was real, magnificent, and completely silent. Still no response to our hails, Commander, Lieutenant Rivera reported from his communication station. The structure's energy signature remains stable, but dormant. Sarah nodded, her reflection grim in the reinforced glass. The fortress shouldn't exist, not here, not anywhere. Its architecture defied everything they knew about the laws of physics, its crystalline surfaces somehow both solid and fluid, like frozen time-given form. Prepare the shuttle, she ordered, already reaching for her EVA suit. I'm going in. Commander, Rivera protested, protocol dictates. Protocol didn't account for finding an impossible alien fortress buried under Europa's ice. She sealed her helmet with practiced efficiency. If anything happens, initiate Protocol Omega and get the ship back to Earth. They need to know what we found here. The shuttle ride through Europa's thin atmosphere was surprisingly smooth, the fortress's gravitational field seeming to guide them to a landing pad that materialized from the shifting crystal surface. Sarah's boots touched down with a magnetic click, the only sound in the absolute silence of the alien structure. Her suit's sensors registered breathable atmosphere inside, another impossibility on Europa, but she kept her helmet sealed. 20 years of xenoarchaeology had taught her that the most beautiful discoveries were often the deadliest. The fortress entrance opened without prompting, crystal planes sliding apart like liquid geometry. Inside, corridors stretched in impossible directions, their walls pulsing with soft blue light that seemed to follow her movement. Sarah's hand brushed against a crystal surface, and the entire structure hummed in response. Welcome, Guardian. The voice resonated directly in her mind, bypassing her suit's communication systems. Sarah froze, her training warring with curiosity. You need not fear. You have been expected. I'm Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Science Vessel Hawking, she responded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. What are you? I am the Nexus. The fortress, the Guardian, the last defense. You have been chosen. The blue light intensified, and Sarah felt a presence brush against her consciousness, ancient and vast beyond comprehension. Images flooded her mind, civilizations rising and falling across millennia, guardians coming and going, and something dark stirring in the spaces between stars. Chosen for what? She managed to ask, struggling to process the cascade of information. To prevent the unmaking. To maintain the barrier. To become more than what you are. The crystal walls around her began to shift, revealing a chamber that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. At its center floated a chair, or something like a chair, made of the same living crystal as the rest of the fortress. The previous guardian failed. The darkness grows. Will you accept the mantle? Sarah's mind raced. Everything about this violated protocol, logic, and probably several laws of physics. But she could feel the truth of the Nexus's words resonating in her bones. Something was coming, something that threatened not just Earth but existence itself. What happens if I say no? Then another will be chosen. But time grows short, and you are optimal. Sarah took a deep breath, remembering all the times she'd dreamed of making a discovery that would change humanity's understanding of the universe. She hadn't expected that discovery to ask for her help in saving it. What do I need to do? Sit. Merge. Become. The crystal chair pulsed invitingly. Sarah took one last look at the Europa sky visible through the fortress's translucent walls, at the research vessel hovering above like a distant star. Then she removed her helmet, took 7 steps forward, and sat down. The universe exploded behind her eyes. Crystal tendrils emerged from the chair, wrapping around her arms and legs. Sarah tried to stay calm as they pierced her suit, then her skin, connecting with her nervous system. Knowledge poured into her mind, the true history of the universe, the nature of the barrier between dimensions, the price of becoming a guardian. The process has begun, the Nexus announced. You will change. You will transcend. You will protect. As consciousness faded, Sarah saw her hand beginning to crystallize, becoming one with the fortress. Her last human thought was a quiet apology to her crew for what she was about to become. The transformation took hold, and Commander Saracen ceased to exist as she had been. In her place, something new awakened, part human, part crystalline entity, all guardian. Above, the fortress's spires blazed with renewed purpose, sending a signal across space that hadn't been seen in 1,000 years. The last guardian had taken her place, and the darkness stirring between dimensions took notice. Digital dreams. The dreams started 3 days after Sarah's transformation. In them, she was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere within the fortress. Her consciousness flowed through crystalline circuits, tasting data streams and swimming through quantum probabilities. She saw the previous guardians, hundreds of them, their memories preserved in the fortress's crystalline matrix. Some had been human like her, others were beings of pure energy, silicon-based life forms, or creatures that defied classification. But they all shared one thing: they had failed. Sarah watched their stories unfold in accelerated time, experienced their triumphs and failures as if they were her own. She felt their gradual transformation from biological entities into something more, their struggle to maintain their original identity as the fortress reshaped them. "How do I remain myself?" she asked the Nexus during one of her lucid moments. "Identity is fluid," the ancient AI responded. "Change is inevitable. The question is not how to remain, but how to evolve." Sarah's physical form had already begun to change. Crystalline patterns spread across her skin like delicate frost, their facets catching and refracting the fortress's ambient light. Her eyes now glowed with the same blue radiance as the structure's core, and when she moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around her. "Show me what destroyed the last guardian," she commanded. The fortress's memory crystals pulsed, and Sarah found herself experiencing the final moments of her predecessor. The being had once been a quantum consciousness from the Andromeda galaxy, drawn to the fortress by the same signal that had led Sarah here. She watched through its crystalline senses as darkness poured through a tear in spacetime, not just absence of light, but absence of existence itself. The Guardian had sealed the breach, but at a terrible cost. Its consciousness had shattered, fragments scattered across the fortress's memory banks like broken glass. Sarah could still sense pieces of it, ghostly whispers in the data streams. "Be warned," the Nexus intoned. "What you witness may alter your fundamental nature." "I stopped being purely human the moment I sat in that chair," Sarah replied. "Show me everything." The memories crashed over her like a tsunami. She saw the pattern now: each guardian had faced the same enemy, the same creeping darkness that sought to unmake reality. Each had found a different way to fight it, and each had eventually fallen. But with every failure, the fortress learned, adapted, evolved. Sarah spent what felt like years sifting through the accumulated knowledge, though her biological sense of time told her only weeks had passed. She learned to manipulate the fortress's quantum architecture, to extend her consciousness through its crystalline network, to perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously. The crew of the Hawking maintained their orbit around Europa, sending regular communications that grew increasingly concerned. Sarah responded with reassurances, knowing they couldn't possibly understand what she was becoming. Lieutenant Rivera's voice held barely concealed worry when he reported strange energy signatures appearing at the edge of the solar system. They were coming. She could feel it. Sarah's dreams took on new urgency. She began to understand that the fortress wasn't just a defensive structure, it was a transformation engine, designed to create beings capable of fighting an enemy that existed beyond conventional reality. Each Guardian's failure had added to its understanding, refined its processes. She was its latest iteration, but something was different this time. Where previous Guardians had been slowly consumed by the fortress's crystalline nature, Sarah found herself maintaining a core of humanity even as she evolved. The Nexus noticed it too. Your pattern is unique, it observed. You integrate without losing cohesion. Adapt without dissolution. Maybe that's what you've been working toward, Sarah suggested. Not replacement, but synthesis. She explored this theory through the fortress's vast databases, comparing her transformation to those of previous guardians. Where they had tried to resist the change, she embraced it while anchoring herself to her human memories, her identity. The crystal patterns on her skin now covered most of her body, but they enhanced rather than replaced her biological systems. Then came the night when she dreamed of her own death, not in the past, but in a possible future. She saw herself facing the darkness, saw the choice she would have to make. The fortress had been preparing her for this moment since her arrival. Sarah woke to alarms ringing throughout the structure. The energy signatures Rivera had reported were growing stronger, forming a pattern she recognized from the memories of fallen guardians. The darkness was testing the barriers between dimensions, looking for weak points. She reached out with her enhanced senses, feeling the solar system's quantum field like a spider's web. The distortions were subtle, but growing. Earth scientists would detect them soon, if they hadn't already. They would see them as astronomical anomalies, gravitational lenses where none should exist. How long do we have? She asked the Nexus. They breach in 3 days. The final transformation must be completed. Sarah stood in the fortress's central chamber, her crystalline skin refracting countless possible futures. The chair where her journey had begun pulsed with familiar light. She understood now that her initial transformation had only been the first step. The fortress had been waiting, testing, preparing her for what came next. Will I survive? You will become, the Nexus answered. What you become depends on what you preserve. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of centuries of Guardians' memories. They had all faced this choice, and they had all chosen to sacrifice themselves completely to the fortress's power. She intended to try something different. Begin the procedure, she commanded. But this time, we do it my way. The fortress hummed with anticipation as Sarah Chen prepared to attempt what no guardian had managed before, a true synthesis of human consciousness and quantum architecture. Above Europa, the darkness continued to grow, and time grew short. The final transformation began, and Sarah smiled as reality bent around her. She had stopped dreaming of the past. It was time to forge a new future. The awakening. The signal arrived without warning. Sarah felt it pierce through the quantum fabric of space-time, a cry of pure anguish that resonated with the crystalline matrices of the fortress. Her transformed consciousness expanded outward, analyzing the transmission on countless dimensional frequencies simultaneously. Threat detected, the Nexus announced unnecessarily. Initiating defensive protocols. Wait, Sarah commanded, her voice echoing with harmonics that hadn't existed in human speech. Something about the signal felt wrong, or rather, not as wrong as it should. The memories of previous guardians suggested that the darkness's approach was always preceded by entropy cascades, reality degradation, the unmaking of space itself. This was different. This was. It's a distress call, she realized, the crystalline patterns across her skin pulsing with revelation. Show me the source. The fortress's sensor arrays reconfigured, bending spacetime to give her a clear view of the signal's origin. A ship, no, a vessel that had once been a ship, drifted in the void beyond Neptune's orbit. Its hull was partially crystallized, covered in growths that looked disturbingly similar to Sarah's own transformed flesh. Caution advised, the Nexus warned. Pattern matches previous corruption events. But Sarah was already reaching out with her enhanced senses, touching the vessel's quantum signature. The contact nearly shattered her consciousness. Pain. Fear. Transformation gone wrong. The ship's crew had discovered something they thought was a simple crystal artifact. They hadn't known it was a fragment of a fallen guardian, hadn't understood what would happen when they tried to study it. They're changing, Sarah whispered. Like I did, but without guidance, without control. The fortress's defensive systems hummed to life, reading the situation as a threat. Sarah felt weapons of unimaginable power charging up, ready to erase the corrupted vessel from existence. "Stand down," she ordered. "They're victims, not invaders." Previous Guardians attempted rescue of corrupted entities, the Nexus reminded her. All attempts failed. All led to breaches. Sarah accessed those memories, watching past Guardians face similar situations. Each time, their attempts at mercy had resulted in disaster. The crystalline corruption had spread, creating tears in reality that allowed the true darkness to enter. But something was different this time. She could feel it. "Those Guardians tried to prevent the transformation," she said. "What if instead, we guide it?" The Nexus was silent for 3.72 seconds, an eternity in quantum time. "Unprecedented approach," it finally responded. "Risk factors incalculable. Show me the ship's crew." The fortress's sensors penetrated the vessel's hull, revealing the horror within. 12 crew members, their bodies partially crystallized, their minds caught between human consciousness and something else. They were neither fully transformed nor fully human, trapped in an excruciating limbo. Sarah made her decision. "Open a quantum channel," she commanded. "Full spectrum. Warning, direct contact may compromise fortress integrity." "That's an order." The fortress complied, establishing a connection that transcended normal spacetime. Sarah reached out across the void, touching the tortured minds aboard the vessel. Their agony threatened to overwhelm her, but her weeks of preparation had made her stronger than she realized. "I am the Guardian," she projected, her thoughts carried on waves of quantum resonance. "I understand what's happening to you. Let me help." Their response was chaos, 12 minds screaming in frequencies that would have shattered normal matter. But Sarah had moved beyond normal matter. She caught their fear, their confusion, their pain, and began to reshape it. Through their fragmenting consciousness, she saw how it had happened. The crystalline shard they'd found had been dormant, a piece of a long-dead Guardian drifting in space. Their attempts to study it had awakened something, not the darkness itself, but an echo of the fortress's transformative power. "Don't fight it," she told them, sharing her own memories of transformation. "The more you resist, the more it hurts. Let me show you the way." One by one, their minds began to align with hers. Sarah guided them through the change, showing them how to maintain their core identity while embracing the crystalline evolution. It was exhausting, delicate work. One wrong move could still trigger a catastrophic breach. The Nexus watched silently as she worked, its ancient consciousness, perhaps learning something new from her approach. Hours stretched into days as Sarah helped the crew complete their transformation. Gradually, their ship itself began to change, integrating with their crystalline forms to create something entirely new, a mobile extension of the fortress's power. When it was done, 13 transformed consciousnesses resonated in quantum harmony. The crew had become like her, different yet the same, their humanity preserved within crystalline forms. "Unprecedented outcome," the Nexus observed. "New strategic possibilities available." "The darkness is still coming," Sarah said, feeling the distant wrongness growing stronger. "But now we're not alone." The transformed ship moved into orbit around Europa, its crystal surfaces glowing with the same blue light as the fortress. Its crew began to learn, to understand their new nature, to prepare for the battle ahead. Sarah stood in the fortress's central chamber, her transformed body humming with power. She had proved that the Guardian's curse of isolation could be broken, that transformation didn't have to mean loss of self. Now she had to prove that it could make a difference against the approaching darkness. As if in response to her thoughts, the fortress's sensors detected the first true entropy cascade at the edge of the solar system. The real test was about to begin. Convergence. The armada emerged from the void like a nightmare made real. Sarah counted over 1,000 ships through the fortress's quantum sensors, each one a perversion of normal spacetime. They weren't vessels in any conventional sense, they were wounds in reality, tears in the fabric of existence that had somehow gained sentience. "Show me what they really are," she commanded. The fortress's sensors shifted, penetrating beyond normal dimensional boundaries. Sarah's enhanced consciousness recoiled at what she saw. The ships were merely symptoms of a larger disease, the darkness itself, reaching tendrils into their universe through countless small breaches. Full convergence in 6 hours, the Nexus reported. Enemy force exceeds all previous encounters. Sarah reached out to the transformed crew of the crystalline ship, now designated Crystal 1. Their merged consciousness responded instantly, 12 voices speaking as one through quantum channels. "We see them," they reported. "The patterns, they're trying to establish a resonance cascade." Sarah had seen this strategy in the memories of fallen guardians. The darkness would use its ships to create a harmonic frequency, amplifying the natural quantum vibrations of spacetime until reality itself began to tear apart. But this time, things were different. Where previous guardians had stood alone, Sarah had allies. More importantly, she had proof that transformation could be controlled, guided, used constructively rather than destructively. An idea began to form in her crystalline mind. "Nexus, show me the fortress's full quantum architecture." The display materialized around her, a complex lattice of dimensional frequencies and energy patterns. She had studied it before, but now she saw something new. The fortress wasn't just a defensive structure, it was a tuning fork for reality itself. "Crystal 1, move into position here," she commanded, highlighting a point in space where quantum resonances naturally converged. "We're going to give them a frequency they weren't expecting." As the transformed ship maneuvered into place, Sarah began the most dangerous modification she had yet attempted. Her consciousness merged deeper with the fortress's systems, not just interfacing with them, but actively rewriting their fundamental patterns. "Warning," the Nexus announced. "Structural integrity compromised. Pattern dissolution imminent." "No," Sarah corrected, her voice resonating with newfound power. "Not dissolution, evolution." She could feel herself changing again, her transformed body becoming something even the fortress hadn't predicted. The crystalline patterns that covered her skin began to pulse with complex geometries, each facet a window into another dimension. The memories of previous guardians surged through her mind, but now she wasn't just watching them, she was integrating them, learning from their failures and successes in real time. She understood now why they had failed. They had tried to fight the darkness with solidity, with barriers and boundaries. But you couldn't fight absence with presence. You had to become the void itself. "Everyone, brace for convergence," she broadcast to both the fortress and Crystal 1. Then she began to sing. It wasn't sound in any normal sense. It was a quantum harmony, a resonance that rippled through multiple dimensions simultaneously. The fortress's crystals picked up the frequency, amplifying it, modulating it. Crystal 1's transformed crew added their own harmonics, 12 voices becoming one, becoming infinity. The darkness responded immediately. Its ships began to shift, their reality-warping fields intensifying as they tried to disrupt the new frequency. Space itself buckled under the competing forces. Sarah felt her consciousness expanding beyond normal boundaries. She was the fortress, she was the quantum field, she was the song itself. The crystalline patterns of her body began to dissolve, not into nothingness, but into pure potential. Warning, the Nexus tried again. Guardian dissolution exceeding safe parameters. "Trust me," Sarah whispered, her voice echoing across dimensions. "Sometimes you have to break something to make it stronger." The darkness launched its first direct assault. Reality-consuming beams lanced out from the void ships, aimed at both the fortress and Crystal 1. But the quantum harmony had created something new, a field of possibility where certainty had once existed. The beams passed through them as if they weren't there. In a way, they weren't. Sarah had shifted them partially out of normal spacetime, spreading their existence across multiple dimensional frequencies. "Now," she commanded, "full convergence." The fortress's power reached its peak. Sarah's consciousness merged completely with its systems, with Crystal 1's crew, with the quantum fabric of space itself. For a moment that contained eternity, she ceased to exist as an individual entity. She became everything. And in becoming everything, she finally understood what she had to do. The darkness had always sought to unmake reality by creating absence. But Sarah and her allies had become living proof that destruction could lead to transformation. As her consciousness spread through the quantum field, she began to change the very rules by which reality operated. The void ships faltered, their entropy fields meeting something they couldn't consume, a form of existence that embraced its own unmaking as a path to rebirth. Transcendence. The universe held its breath. Sarah existed everywhere and nowhere, her consciousness spread across quantum frequencies that had never been meant to support human thought. Through her expanded awareness, she could finally see the truth about the darkness, and about herself. "It's not trying to destroy us," she broadcast to Crystal One's crew and the Nexus. "It's trying to evolve." The revelation cascaded through her transformed consciousness like a wave of crystal fire. The darkness wasn't an enemy seeking destruction, it was another universe attempting to grow beyond its boundaries, blindly reaching out through dimensional barriers in a desperate bid for transcendence. "Explain," the Nexus demanded, its ancient protocols struggling to process this paradigm shift. Sarah gathered her fractured consciousness, focusing it into a coherent stream of understanding. The fortress's memory crystals blazed with new light as she accessed them, recontextualizing millennia of accumulated data. Every guardian who faced the darkness saw it as a force of destruction because that's what they were programmed to expect, she explained. But look at the pattern. Look at what really happens during each incursion. She projected the truth through quantum channels, letting everyone see what she had discovered. The darkness didn't simply consume, it transformed. Every breach point, every void ship, every entropy cascade was an attempt at communication, at connection, at evolution. "It's like a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis," the merged consciousness of Crystal One's crew observed. "The destruction of the old form is necessary for the new one to emerge." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "But because we fought it, because we tried to contain it, the process became violent, destructive. We need to guide it, just like I guided your transformation." The void ships hung motionless in space, as if sensing the change in understanding. Sarah reached out to them not with weapons or barriers, but with the same quantum harmony she had used to help Crystal One's crew. "Warning," the Nexus interjected. "Previous guardians attempted communication. All failed." "They tried to communicate through resistance," Sarah countered. "We're going to communicate through acceptance." She began to sing again, but this time the quantum harmony carried a different message. Instead of fighting the darkness, she matched its frequency, embraced its pattern, offered it a path to controlled transformation rather than chaotic destruction. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The void ship's entropy field shifted, aligning with the new frequency. The darkness itself seemed to pause, to listen, to consider this new possibility. Sarah felt her consciousness expanding even further, touching minds and realities she had never imagined could exist. The darkness was ancient, vast, beautiful in its own way, a universe that had reached the end of its natural evolution and sought to become something more. "Help me," she broadcast to Crystal One and the fortress. "Help me show them the way." The transformed crew added their voices to hers, their quantum harmonies weaving together into a symphony of possibility. The fortress itself began to change, its crystalline architecture extending beyond normal spacetime to create bridges between realities. In that moment of connection, Sarah understood the true purpose of the fortress and its guardians. They weren't meant to be eternal defenders against destruction, they were meant to be guides for evolution, helping both universes transcend their limitations. The darkness responded with its own song, a complex pattern of quantum frequencies that spoke of age and wisdom and longing. For the first time in countless millennia, two universes began to communicate. Sarah felt herself changing again, becoming something beyond even her transformed state. The crystalline patterns of her body dissolved into pure energy, pure potential, pure consciousness. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She understood that this was always meant to be the final step. Transformation protocols exceeded, the Nexus announced. New pattern emerging. Yes, Sarah agreed, her voice resonating across dimensions. A new pattern for both universes. The void ships began to change, their entropy fields transforming into something constructive rather than destructive. The darkness itself started to shift, guided by the quantum harmonies into a controlled metamorphosis. Through it all, Sarah maintained her core identity, not fighting the change, but directing it, showing both universes how to evolve without losing themselves. Crystal One's crew followed her lead, their transformed consciousness helping to stabilize the massive energies being channeled. The fortress's spires blazed with impossible light as two universes began to merge, not in chaos and destruction, but in harmony and growth. Sarah spread her awareness through both realities, maintaining the delicate balance required for true transcendence. Hours stretched into days as the transformation continued. When it was done, something new existed in the space between universes, a bridge, a connection, a possibility. The darkness had found its evolution, and humanity had gained access to entirely new realms of existence. Sarah gathered her consciousness back into a more focused form, though she would never again be limited to a single shape or dimension. The crystalline patterns of her body reformed, now shot through with shadows that weren't darkness, but doorways to other realities. What now? Crystal One's crew asked through their quantum link. Sarah smiled, feeling the infinite possibilities stretching before them. Now we do what the fortress was always meant to do. We guide. We teach. We help others transcend. The Nexus's ancient protocols finally adapted to the new paradigm. Purpose achieved. Beginning new operational phase. Above Europa's icy surface, the fortress gleamed with both light and darkness, its crystalline spires reaching into multiple dimensions. Sarah Chen, no longer just a guardian but a bridge between universes, prepared to welcome the first of many who would seek to follow the path she had discovered. The age of isolation was over. The age of transcendence had begun.